name is Bonaventure. Welcome to our commercial class. Today we are going to look at a topic known as sale of goods, and the content of the sale of goods. We will look at the nature of contract in the sale of goods, and also how those contracts are formed in the course of selling goods. We will also look at the terms of the contract, and also the transfer of property and title in goods to the buyer. We will also look at the rights and duties of the parties, and also we will also look at auction sale. And if time allows, we might also look at the international contracts. But if time does not allow, then we will shelve it until next time. Yeah, when it comes to the nature of contract in the sale of goods, one, it must be understood that the seller has a right to sell the goods because he has agreed to engage in the business of selling goods. Therefore, the law gives him a right to sell those goods to whoever wants to buy them. Therefore, the seller, in the contract of sale of goods, the seller has a right to sell his goods to whoever wants to buy them. And the goods that you have to sell must be in conformity with their description. They must correspond to their description. Because when you are going to sell goods, the buyer wants goods of such and such a quality, and then you sell him or her goods of lower standard or substandard goods, then that will not be right, and such a contract may become null and void. Goods must correspond to their description. Also, goods must be of merchantable quality. They should not be substandard. They should be of merchantable quality. And whenever goods are bought, they are bought for, the buyer buys them for a certain purpose. And therefore, the goods to be sold to the buyer must be for the intended purpose, but not something else, but not anything else. Must be for the intended purpose. And if the goods were sold, for example, by sample, then the goods sold to that buyer must correspond to the descriptions given in the sample. So he checks the sample, and then he checks the goods. The quality must be the same. The quality must be the same. Also, when you sell goods, to a buyer, the property in the goods passes to the buyer, immediately the contract is made and is immaterial, whether at the time of payment or at the time of delivery, or both is postponed. So long as the agreement to sell goods has been made, the property in the goods passes directly to the buyer. Even if delivery would be postponed for the other week, but the goods still remain his and it does not belong to the seller anymore. The goods will still be of the buyer, but not of the seller anymore. And also, if the seller is supposed to do some rectification here and there on the goods, the property will not pass to the buyer until what he was told to rectify is made. So until the rectification asked for has been made, the property does not pass to the buyer. It is still retained by the seller. And also, where the seller has to weigh or measure until such requirements are met, the property also does not pass to the buyer until whatever was required, if it was sugar, is weighed, and the weight noted, is when the property, the said goods can pass to the buyer. And also, when goods are delivered to the buyer on approval, so long as the property has been delivered to the buyer on approval, the property therein passes to the buyer. So long as the buyer agrees to be brought the goods, and he has been brought the books, now that property in goods passes to him. It becomes his, no longer the property of the seller. Because a seller who delivers goods to the buyer is deemed to have unconditionally appropriated the goods in accordance with the contract. Therefore, when he has delivered the goods to the buyer, the property in the goods passes to the buyer. However, these two parties, the seller and the buyer, have their rights and duties as well. The seller, for example, the seller of goods is deemed to be unpaid if, when the whole of the price has not been paid or tendered, the seller of the goods is seen as unpaid, is seen as somebody who has not been paid, until the whole price of the goods has been paid. But if it has been paid halfway, then it cannot be deemed to have been paid until everything is paid as agreed in the contract of the buyer and the seller. And also when there has been a negotiable instrument received as a conditional payment, and the condition in which it was received has not been fulfilled by reason of the dishonor of the instrument, then the seller will not be considered as having been paid. Negotiable instruments are such things like checks. If a check has been given to the seller, but when he banks the check, then the same is dishonored, then it cannot be said that he was paid, whereas the check was dishonored. Therefore, the buyer remains liable to pay the seller the last cent. Otherwise, the seller would be regarded as having not been paid by the seller. Also, the seller has a right of lien on the goods. For example, if the buyer has not completed payment of the goods sold to him, the seller has a right to retain those goods until the buyer makes payment for the goods purchased from the seller. Until at such a time that the buyer will make the payment is when the seller will release the goods to the buyer. Also, the seller has a right, if the goods are on transit, and maybe gets wind of the fact that the buyer has become bankrupt, the seller has a right to go and stop those goods from reaching the buyer. Also, the unpaid seller has also a right of reselling his goods. If the person that he wanted to sell to will not have honored his promise, he has a right to sell those goods to recover his expenses. But where the property in goods has not passed to the buyer, the unpaid seller has a right of withholding delivery until also the buyer does his part of paying for the goods. Is when he may release them. We have talked about the seller. Let us also talk about the buyer. Equally importantly, the buyer has also his own right, his own rights. He has rights also. The buyer also must ensure that the goods sold to him are of merchantable quality. They must be of the quality, they must be of high quality required of such a goods. So he has that right, that he should not just be sold anything of low value, anything of low quality. It must be of a standardized good of high quality. And also, those goods must be fit for the intended purpose. Because the buyer might want to buy goods, maybe doors of a house, and if the doors will not be of the standard required, then the buyer has a right to reject such a goods. And also the goods sold to him, if he was first given a sample, it must correspond to that. Those goods must correspond to that sample that he had been previously he had been given. That is the right of the buyer. Let us also look at other mode of selling goods. We have seen the seller selling goods directly to the buyer, and the buyer buying goods directly from the seller. Let us see also how goods can also be sold by auction. Goods also can be sold by auction. And a sale by auction is a public sale where various intending buyers overbids for the goods and try to outbid each other. Ultimately, the goods are sold to the highest bidder. An auction sale is complete when the auctioneer announces its completion by the fall of the hammer. The property then passes on the fall of the hammer to the buyer. And if the fall of the hammer, the bidder has the right to revoke his or her bid. The auctioneer is generally not the seller, but the agent of the real seller, the real owner of the goods. The auctioneer simply acts on behalf of the owner of the goods, and he in turn is paid a commission for the services rendered by selling the goods of the owner, on behalf of the owner. And well, whereas in an auction, the highest bidder will eventually be the one to buy the goods at the fall of the hammer. But there are also rules governing such transactions. For example, a sale is complete when the hammer falls. But before the hammer falls, then it's not complete. And a buyer can withdraw his bid anytime before the fall of the hammer. And also, a sale can be subject to a reserve price. Maybe you can be told that at the fall of the hammer, you just pay a half price, and then later you finish the rest. And also when goods are sold lots, when they are sold one lot, two lot, in lots, each lot has a specific price. Each lot is part of a separate sale. It does not mean that all the lots will be sold at once, no. Each lot will be given a separate sale. Will be given a separate sale. Therefore, we have looked at the nature of the contract, terms of the contract, transfer of property and title in goods, rights and duties of the parties in a sale, the seller and the buyer. We have looked also about the sale by auction. So until next time, my good students, make a research on your own about the sale of goods. It is a very short topic. It does not entail much. And then when we meet again, we will look at the international contracts. And once we look at the international contracts, then we will have finished the topic on sale of goods. Until next time, goodbye till we meet again.